We meet again, friends and neighbors, here for Table Talk. I'm your host, Stan Deatherage, my co-host and colleague, Down East Dave Hudson.
Good to see you.
Thank you. Nice to see you again.
Absolutely.
Of course, it was just this weekend we saw each other for a quite extended time.
Just a few hours.
Just a few hours, quite a few too many hours, I might add.
That's right.
But we're going to talk about that a little bit later. But Dave, I think you came up with the motif for today's meeting, a title of sorts. What would you call it? Something about the seasons?
Yeah, the seasons are changing. It's time for some spring cleaning, and I think we're seeing that here in Beaufort County right now based on what we've seen over the weekend and what we're seeing in the news.
Yes, and we're going to talk about spring cleaning and some other areas as well, but we talked about this before. All politics are local, all government is local, so we're going to stick to the local scene right now. What would you like to talk about first in terms of spring cleaning here in Beaufort County? Has a political animal here in Beaufort County changed its coat and colors a bit?
I think we're seeing the leopard spots changing a little bit.
The emperor has no clothes.
No, not at all. I think the truth has come to light. We've seen folks for who they really are, and it's making a difference.
Yes, you're alluding to the Republican convention this weekend here in Beaufort County. Can I set this up?
Yes, absolutely. Go ahead.
Beaufort County is a little bit different than a lot of Republican counties. Beaufort County was always a Democrat county for years. I got into politics in 1992, and I became a Republican then. I had been a Democrat and a liberal Democrat, then a moderate Democrat, then a conservative Democrat. In fact, they wanted me to run for office in the Democrat Party years and years and years ago, and I didn't care anything about politics. But I was in business, and one of the other things I did, I was in when I had some spare time, I was in the JCs. Anybody remember the JCs? Yes. We don't have that in Beaufort County anymore, but we had a young Republican club then. And so I got roostered out of the JCs. I think I was 37 years old, and I had nowhere to go. I wanted to do something. So there we were. I'd already been voting for Reagan one time and never voted for a Democrat because I hit a certain point in my life. And I said, these guys don't make any sense. This is back then, before the AOCs and the Chuck Schumers and the other malcontents. It really can't string a sentence together that makes any cognitive sense to me whatsoever. But even then, I found that I liked the Ronald Reagans and the George H. Bushes better, and then the Walter Jones, those kind of guys. So I said, I'm going to switch parties. I'm going to become a young Republican. And that was a long, long, long time ago. And things have changed since then in Beaufort County. At that time, there were very few Republicans in Beaufort County. It was mostly Democrat. You weren't living here then, but you're from Beaufort County, but you were living down in South Carolina then, or all points north, south, east, and west as a military man.
Yes.
But Beaufort County had maybe a handful of Republicans, probably less than 2,000 Republicans registered, and there's probably about 20-something thousand Democrats registered. So I joined the Young Republicans anyway. And then I became a politician 2 years later when I was asked to run for county commission. I actually won the seat, was top vote getter, got in and found out all about bipartisanship. Bipartisanship means you're the one Republican on the board, you do it our way. I've remember that ever since when I've been told I need to be more bipartisan, especially when we have a majority of Republicans.
That's right.
Supposed Republicans serving. And in Beaufort County, we have a problem. We have what I would call a rhino infestation. And then it's known across the state. Beaufort County votes very well in presidential elections. I think we went over 65% for Trump. However, we don't do well on a lot of other elections, especially local ones, because we have imposters, interlopers. I call them knockoff Republicans. And we had a convention this weekend, and at that convention, we were set to make some things straight. Some of us worked hard. We organized. We got some people to the convention, and some things happened. Can you expand on that?
Sure. A lot of stuff happened at the convention. Of course, if you've never attended one, what happens first, even though it should not happen this way, is you have a precinct meeting. That's the lowest. When you carve out how we vote, that's the lowest element that we're looking at. So those precincts. The precincts are organized. It's essentially your friends, your neighbors, the people who live in your geographic area. And you get together, you elect your party leadership for the precinct, a chairman, a vice chair, a secretary, folks like that. And at that point in time, that's when you should start looking at how you want the leadership in the county to be. So those precinct meetings are important, especially if they're held prior to the convention, because that gives the precincts a chance to organize. It gives anybody who's interested in a leadership position within the party in the county the ability to campaign, reach out to those different precincts, give them their opinion on, where the party stands currently, their vision for the party going forward. And really have a chance to campaign just like anything else would happen. I mean, that's really as grassroots as you can get into how we do politics here in America, how we establish our government here in America. Unfortunately, what we've been seeing for the past number of years, probably almost a decade, is the folks that are in control want to have those precinct meetings on the same day as the county convention. And what that does is it makes for a very long day. It also limits any opposition, anybody that's outside of the group that wants to potentially run or be involved in county politics in the direction of the party. It limits their ability to have any say or outreach or ability to campaign for those positions. But that's how it's currently taking place. So after the precinct meeting, which happened in the morning on Saturday, we moved into the actual county convention itself. Those folks from the precinct would elect delegates. Those people have the ability to vote in the county precinct meeting. Those are the folks who are going to look at how the party is organized, make any changes if we need to in the way that we run the party in Beaufort County. And then we have the ability to elect the leadership, the vice chair, the first and second vice chairs, the chairman of the party, the secretary, the treasurer, folks like that. That's important because when we look at all of the elections that are coming up over the next 2-year cycle, we really need a strong, united party that's going to be able to organize and get good candidates vetted and then campaign for them and get them elected to those positions, whether it be school board, county commission, the state senate and the state legislature, or the Senate seat here in North Carolina at the federal level. So there's very important elections that are coming up, and we want to be able to have our political party and our leadership really guiding the progress of the party, choosing those candidates and being involved.
And I'd like to interject one thing. When I got elected first back in 1994, and then I was reelected in 1998, and I have the distinction of being the first Republican ever reelected to any office here in the history of Beaufort County. Hood Richardson was the second. And Hood is despised, and by association, I think I'm despised by a group of people, a lot of them outsiders. Yes. And the sad part is some of us had really worked to build this party. I started off as a young Republican working to build this party. And then I got elected, and then Hood got elected, and we were mainstays in the Republican Party, along with a few others. Steve Rader is one. And we did a lot of good things. And we started getting people elected. And we got some commissioners elected. But eventually, on and on and on, the Republican Party became the majority party here in Beaufort County. A lot of that had to do with national politics, of course, and then with the implosion of the Democratic Socialist Party and the non-patriot left, a lot of people were just rushing to either to become an independent or a Republican because they have nowhere else to go if they're actually thinkers of a sane mind. So we've wound up with a lot of strays in the Republican Party. A lot of them call themselves Christian conservatives. And I will argue, if you got to tell somebody you're conservative or Christian, you're probably neither.
I would say that's probably true in most cases, especially if you look at what people are saying. I think it is important to identify, where your values are, where your convictions are, but it's standing by those convictions is what really proves whether or not that you are who you say you are. Unfortunately, we do have a lot of wolves in sheep's clothing.
Yes. We do, and it makes it tough for folks that are elected who actually need the help of another like-minded conservative on the Board of Commissioners, somebody that's new to politics, somebody unlike myself or Hood Richardson who probably don't need the party. We need a strong party to get these other people elected and to get a school board elected. We've elected 6 Republicans out of 9 school board members, yet you can only count on 2 or 3 of them to vote the right way.
It's actually 1 Democrat sitting on the school board, one of 9 right now. and we still are allowing the school board to cave and cater to a Democratic Socialist superintendent. There is no backbone whatsoever with our current school board.
There's only one Democratic
One
Socialist?
Democrat, Alpha Booth.
What are the other two? I thought they were Democrats. They're not?
No.
Are they independents?
No, they're all Republicans, supposedly.
You've got 8 out of 9 Republicans, and 2 to 3 you can count on voting with any competency of cognitive thought.
That's what we're seeing, yes.
And this is a school board.
School board.
We're asking people to be smart managing the schools so our children will be smarter.
Correct.
And yet you don't have a smart school board.
Whether they're smart or not, they have no backbone. They have no ability to stand up.
If you can't rationalize your opinion or your positions and develop the backbone from an intellectual acuity that you will stand beside and with and use as a tool, then you're not too daggone smart, are you?
Not really.
Wow, that's scary. You know, I've said this before. I'll say it again. 2 things I abhor: stupid politicians and bureaucrats that don't know their place.
Absolutely.
So, what did we do this weekend in the Beaufort County Republican Party when we met in convention after being out of control in that party for decades? The conservatives have been shunned, kicked to the side, embarrassments to all. What did we do this weekend to make a difference?
We showed up in force, I think, is what really happened. Is we saw a large turnout, at least initially, before people were starting to get bored or it was dragging on too long. But what we saw was the true split or the divide within the Republican Party here in Beaufort County, the divide between the conservative Republican folks and then those folks that you may only call Republican in name only. And we really saw where that leadership came from. One of the key issues that we brought forth from the very beginning, Hood Richardson brought forward a motion to expand the size of the executive committee. That's the folks that run the party in Beaufort County. And what had been happening over the past number of years is it was a vote for folks by name. And it really kind of evolved into just a hand-picked system. We're going to pick the folks that we want based on the folks who have the power at this point in time, and we're going to pick our cronies to run the party with us. And that number was around 21 to 24 folks.
And can I add something?
Sure.
At the conventions, what they would do is they would get their officers in first, and then they would announce they had a slate of people they wanted to be on the executive committee. Now, the executive committee members' vote counts just as much as the officers' vote. So it's important to have a strong executive committee. But what they did was they would say, we want these people. By the time we got around to that in these conventions, it's been 5-6 hours. A lot of people have already gone. A lot of them were disgusted with the way the business was run. And this happened this time, but not as much. A lot of our people hung on to the bitter end. So what would happen is you just didn't have any momentum to get enough people on the executive committee to make a difference. But now that is hopefully changed.
It should have changed. And what took place in order to bring about that change, we didn't even have a copy of the party's organizational document on hand. It sat on the website, according to Carolyn Garris, who was the previous chair of the executive committee. And fortunately, somebody in the crowd had a paper copy that we were able to provide so that we could review it, make sure it was in compliance with the state party's organizational document. But as I said, Hood Richardson brought forth a motion. He wanted to expand the ability for folks to serve on the executive committee. So if anybody wanted to serve, they could volunteer, and then we could vote that approved.
So you're saying more additional voices from the public, figuring how it would be best for the majority party in Beaufort County to be run to hopefully elect the better candidates we can get.
Correct.
Maybe through primary. I've always had a primary. I've been elected 7 times in general elections. I've had 14 elections to get there. To get elected. I got to go through a primary every time. Every time I've had a primary. And so therefore, Hood wanted more voices. I called for more transparency. They said, well, we don't have the room. Well, we got room. We got some big facilities in Beaufort County for a small county. we could meet in the commissioner chambers, which would probably comfortably seat 80 people, maybe 90 if you let some folks sit up there where the commissioners sit. And we can sit there for free and do all the business we want to do.
That's right.
And but they had a lot of objections. Work couldn't get done.
A lot
if
of
they
it.
didn't have these people from, most of them outsiders, but were connected to one machine leader or another.
I'd be glad to speak to that or call
Would
it
you?
out. Absolutely.
Thank you.
So there was concern primarily on the side of the rhinos about allowing more folks to be involved in the process. Why we wouldn't, in the Republican Party, want to have more people included, why we'd want to have, community involvement in our politics and open that up to a free society to be involved. That really is kind of the genesis of our form of government. However, our Representative Kidwell saw an issue with increasing the size of the executive committee. He even made a motion to cap the size of the executive committee, which currently had existed at, say, 21 to 24, to cap it at 15.
And he did this after Commissioner Richardson's motion was on the floor.
Correct.
And had been seconded. And discussion had not yet begun on that, but he got it in. And you can do that through Robert's Rules of Order. And that's one of the reasons why I am so happy we commissioners do not have Robert's Rules of Order, because this one very big issue, I didn't know it was going to be as big as it was. I mean, you had it, this man right here ran for chairman, and but it was a foregone conclusion when you were running, and you did quite well. You didn't win, but I hear you only lost by one vote, and they wouldn't announce it to the crowd. So I figured it was pretty close, and then I heard you lost by one vote. And of course, if we'd have had a few more people like Adam O'Neill, if he could have snuck in there, he was shunned. He had helped you on his campaign, your campaign.
Correct.
Rather, and he had become an independent to do so. And he had become a Republican, but he didn't get it back in until about 2 months ago.
It was just after the deadline, January 31st. So he had just missed the deadline.
If he had got it in even a few weeks later and wanted to run as a Republican in a primary, he could have done so.
Correct.
That's a pretty arcane rule, isn't it?
It really is. It's interesting. So there was even a motion on the floor by another gentleman who wanted to suspend debate. Did not even want to debate whether or not we should expand the executive committee. Fortunately, that measure or that proposal was beaten. It was voted down, and then Representative Kidwell's motion was voted down. So we did have
the slimmest of margins.
By the slimmest of margins, one vote.
One vote.
But it was very interesting to watch. You could really see the party politics at play in the rhinos, because if folks would not vote in line, lockstep with what they were told
at certain tables,
they were yelled at, and by current elected members in the Republican Party that traditionally are our traditional rhinos. Stand up, sit down, vote like you're supposed to.
Yeah, you've been told.
That reminds me a lot of Stalin, Mao, Castro, other folks like that.
And I think Commissioner Richardson said it best. This is democracy with a little d.
Yes.
This is a democratic process with a little d. And this is what this is. And we are not a democracy, but we have a democratic process, and it needs to allow people to voice their desires for their representation, be it in a political party or as those that are going to support us and represent us in the governmental and political realm, to which that is the mechanism that they get elected. And there was something I heard at the meeting where Representative Kidwell took issue with our form of government. And he was right, but he was a little bit wrong too, wasn't he?
He really was. When we were looking at that, he made a point to point out that America is not a democracy. We have a different form of government.
Yeah.
However, when he wanted to expand upon that, and he said, the Republican Party, this is the party of Lincoln, this is the party of Eisenhower, this is the party of all of these other Reagan, all these great Republican leaders. He may have forgotten his history, that the Republican Party, when it was formed, really was not the Republican Party that it is today.
Yes.
What we saw in the Republican Party in its early foundational days, this was the party of Lincoln. Lincoln, if you'll remember, was president who, while he did some good things for the country, he suspended the writ of habeas corpus. During his administration, they would throw people in jail without bringing charges, never brought charges against them. This is somebody who wanted to expand the size and scope of the federal government, which he did. This is somebody who wanted to make America's president more powerful. A lot of the powers that came from that came because of Lincoln and his administration. And then that is when we really see the change in the United States from what our traditional country had been founded on, where we had sovereign states. We had more power involved at the state level than we did at the current
Supported
federal
by
government.
the 10th Amendment.
Correct. And we saw even a change in how we referred to this country. Previously to the war between the states, we always referred to the United States as these United States, the states being plural, these. Then after the war, it became the United States, which had a stronger centralized federal government. And it was not until later on, a number of years afterwards, that we see the Republican Party really kind of make a change in policy, and it became the party that we see it as it exists now, a party that's in favor of lower amounts of government, smaller government, fiscal responsibility, low taxes. Those are the type of things that we see now.
Moreover, more states' rights.
Correct.
And really expanding the promise and the privilege of the 10th Amendment.
That's right. So, yes.
Which has always been in the Constitution since the Bill of Rights.
It has.
But got passed over during the Lincoln years because we were at Civil War.
Correct.
I think he said, I am cloaked in immense executive power. Something to that effect.
It is. And that really is one of the key issues that we have to think about when we talk about the issues we're seeing in the Republican Party here in Beaufort County, when we see conservative versus rhino, is what are the core fundamental values of the Republican Party? And if folks are not following those core values, you may vote conservative in Raleigh, but when you back rhinos or folks in the county who are not backing Republican values, when you back folks who want to increase your taxes, not decrease them, when you have Republicans who are not focusing on good education that's not filled with indoctrination, when you have folks that are just not doing the right thing, limited government as opposed to more government, bureaucracy that is effective, not ineffective or incompetent. Those are the issues that we're seeing due to some of the elected officials that are what we would call rhinos in the county being in charge. And now we have been able to see where that power truly comes from. They do trade votes. They exchange favors for power so that they all can stay in power, and they do the best they can to limit any other outside engagement by the public at large or by conservative members of the party that may meddle into what they consider their own space.
And I will state to you quite explicitly, conservative governing local members, and we've had few that have actually governed in a conservative vein, true conservative vein, they are punished. They are punished. Bad things are said about them. Lies are made up. Business is taken from them. And it's really shut our county down. We're not a creative county where we can have expansive thought and decide what's the best way to go just out of pure logic. Generally, it's who you know, who you go with, who's your friend, where's the money, what's in it for me.
That's right.
And it's kind of a non-patriotic way to present the self-governing promise of our representative republic when there's all these special interests come to the fore before you think about what's best for everyone, which is the way we should govern and govern best.
That's right. And government should be based on the free and unfettered consent of the people.
Yes.
You're elected to represent the people, your constituents who put you there. When you fail to do that, you're no better than a tyrant. We talk about the Democratic Socialist Party a lot and how they view things. They really are an elitist group of folks. If you look at them, all you have to look back to is COVID. And when you look at how they operated underneath COVID, you know, what's good for me, we're going to shut everybody's down. We're going to shut down your business. You're not allowed to have freedom to go anywhere. You have to wear a mask.
The box businesses did well.
Right.
And of course, Amazon did well.
Of course.
Yeah.
And yet we see Nancy Pelosi, who had to force her barber to open her shop so that she could go in and get a haircut while not wearing a mask. the hypocrisy is there, but it's that elitist view of we know better than you do, and you'll do as we say because you're either too uneducated or you're just not on the par with us. And that's the way it is.
I'd like to state something. Back in those Helicon days of COVID, Hood Richardson and I presented a resolution. I can't remember if I wrote it or he wrote it, but it was a resolution to open up Beaufort County outside of the special privileges demanded by the governor to keep the state shut down by fiat, by executive privilege. And we wanted to open up Beaufort County, not only the big box stores, which were already open, but all the small stores and small restaurants, and really get around to opening up schools again.
Right.
Immediately. Well, we could only get, out of 5 Republicans on that board, only 2 voted for it. And the other 3 voted against it because they wanted to do what they were told.
That's right.
They wanted to stay in their lane, so to speak. That's what Randy Walker likes to use. Well, they stayed in their lane. Well, come in hindsight, in retrospect, Hood and I were right. Completely
Absolutely.
right. And if we had joined in a lawsuit with other counties to take on the governor and his, what was it called? The privilege he had, the Executive Emergency Act.
Right.
Yeah, the Emergency Act of North Carolina, which needs to be revisited just as soon as we get a Republican governor in office, because the Democrats are going to shut that down. We got a Democratic Socialist governor right now.
That's right.
And that'll get shut down. But we can never allow that to happen again in the state where everything gets shut down for one reason or another. And you limit freedom. They were shutting down churches.
They were shutting everything down. And it really was, I believe, a test to see just how far the government could go in pushing the American citizen.
I think it was too.
And seeing how much control they could have over us. We saw it happen in other countries, Australia.
I think it was a worldwide test.
Worldwide, absolutely. Australia, you would stay at home. The government will bring you food, but you cannot leave until we show up and stick you in the arm with a needle. That's not independence. That's not freedom. And, that would not happen in America.
And the party that was really behind that, the Democratic Socialist Party, speaking of hypocrisy, one of the main slogans is "My body, my choice."
That's right.
Wow. How about that?
Yeah. Again, that elitist mentality. I can speak a little bit to that. There was an interesting article that came out in Vox about, why did Kamala lose the election and just how out of touch with reality the Democratic Party is. David Shore, he's the leader of Blue Rose Consulting Firm. That's probably the leading data scientist that provides democratic statistics to the Democratic Party. He said, I think, and this is, I'll quote, "I think that there are also some big cultural divides between highly educated people who live in cities and everybody else. And to the extent that we make the cultural signifiers of these highly educated people the face and the brand of the party, that is going to make everyone else turn against us." And I may have mentioned already, Nate Cohn, he said, working class white American voters who've read a book in the last year are much more Democratic than working class white voters who haven't. And that really is just this sense of elitism. We know better than you do, and you're going to do as we say, because we know better than you do.
We have our leaders. Most of them are bureaucrats.
Yes.
Yes.
And when
Fauci was a bureaucrat.
He was.
He was the king.
He was a king. And then he got pardoned, for crimes that he wasn't even accused of yet, which does not make sense.
In fact, it's never been done before.
Correct. And
Hunter Biden was pardoned for crimes he may or may not have been involved in.
That's right.
We've never seen that before. The whole family.
When you're guilty, why are you getting a pardon up front? To me, that just shows you're guilty.
Yeah, it really does.
You didn't even put it before a trial. You've already admitted guilt at that point in time.
Yeah. Trump, they said they would pardon Trump. He didn't want to be pardoned.
No.
He had nothing to be pardoned for.
That's right.
It's different in thought.
But it really is. It just shows how out of touch with reality some of these folks are. One of the key statistics that they were looking at was, what was the major issues that folks were concerned about during the previous election, the presidential election last year. In a large, widespread poll, 91% of the folks polled said that it was cost of living was the key issue. After that, it was the size and scope of the federal government, the budget deficit, immigration, crime, and healthcare. And people trusted Republicans more on all of those issues. And
it's just starting.
It's just starting.
The indoctrination within the education system has limited people's intellectual acuity to look beyond the box that they've been placed in.
It really does.
A lot of these folks are very highly educated, and they know well which box they're supposed to exist in. They get in their lane, they kind of stay there, they shut themselves in, they work within the parameters of that box, and all the creative thinking you need to create new stuff.
Yes.
Well, it doesn't come from them, does it?
No.
And these people that aren't very bright and rubes, rednecks, work with their hands, a lot of those people come up with some pretty innovative stuff.
We really do. It's like Hank Williams Jr. saying it. A country boy can survive.
Yes, he can.
We may live out here, but when things get bad, those city dwellers, I hope they can plant a garden or shoot and skin a deer or catch a fish or something like that. Just because you may not have a college education doesn't mean that you're not smart.
No.
And that's where the true breakdown is I think a lot of folks have woken up. The Democratic Party believes that issues that really don't matter to the majority of Americans. Do I care about what your pronouns are when I can't afford my medicine or when I can't afford to put groceries on the table and feed my family? That's just not an issue that anybody's going to care about. And so they have found out that they have a deep, lack of faith in the Democratic Party at this point in time. But the perception that they still have this elitist way of thinking, and to quote David Shore again, if I may, he said, the people that we're trying to persuade have very different values than we do and a very different perception of reality. And a lot of those people are very poorly informed and literally do not consume the sources of information that we broadcast to.
Talking about the indoctrination effect.
Indoctrination, exactly.
So you're better informed if you can be indoctrinated.
Yes.
Yes, I think that might have led to what I see as a real problem in America today, which is Trump derangement syndrome. It was a joke at first. It was a real funny joke, and then it got to be serious.
It did.
And we see a lot of people. We're seeing a political folks. I mean, the Democratic Socialist Party, for all their wisdom, God bless them. I mean, hold up little signs, can't stand for a child that's 13 years old that beat cancer, wants to be a police officer one day. And they can't stand for this or that at these last. It's not a State of the Union, but it's the closest thing we've had to a State of the Union in a long time. These folks have a hard time reconciling what is proper, what is prudent, and what their place is. Yet they are extremely educated. They were running things. Yet we never ever investigated the origins of COVID.
Right.
During the entire time that Joe Biden was president. I say that very loosely because no one's completely sure how much he was president at any given time. And when Nancy Pelosi was Speaker of the House, and Schumer, I think he was Majority Leader in the Senate. They could not find within themselves, even though they had all these branches of government, how to investigate something that changed America, that has sent our children into an abysmal dead end.
Yes.
And learning. I mean, we are so down now in the world, and everybody suffered from COVID, but we responded probably the most poor of all major industrial nations, and they were in charge.
Yes.
And they fought it. In fact, they ran the entire campaign on COVID. That was the reason to get rid of Trump. That and all his proposed felonies and hoaxes that he was involved in, and
they had plenty of time to launch investigations into his conduct during his time as president.
But they couldn't come up with any ideas
about COVID.
No, or any ideas of how to run the nation.
Correct. Or how to come out of Afghanistan without making it be a complete. I can't even think of I was going to say I can't even think of a nice word to say for how bad that was.
I will argue the Afghanistan debacle is this is the darkest day in American military history. I mean, we lost so much while having so little. We were really not under fire.
No,
we did not have to do what we did, but they did it anyway. They gave no purposeful reason as to why they were doing it.
Correct.
I'm like you. I'm dumbfounded. I'm without words sometimes. And I think about just how idiotic President Biden was. And if I call him President Biden, I'm going to put the modifier idiotic before it because he was America's first idiot president. Books will be written about that.
They will be. I guess that's a great thing for Jimmy Carter. Is a lot of folks always said Jimmy Carter was probably the worst president, most ineffective president.
Barack Obama was worse than Jimmy Carter.
but we see the trend going down as opposed to going up for the Democratic Party and who they elect to that senior position of leadership. And speaking of that Afghanistan pullout, history doesn't repeat itself, but it does rhyme. It's not like we didn't see this happen before in Vietnam. Yeah. And then we did it in Afghanistan. You see us pulling out.
But Vietnam was different.
It was different.
We were up against a formidable foe.
It was. And the difference there as well is while you did have South Vietnamese who were willing to fight for their country, it was not at the same level that we saw with Afghanistan or the Afghani population.
Yes.
We left a lot of those folks behind, now to deal with the state of Afghanistan as it is now. And that really does impact the way that the rest of the world is going to view the United States. Do we stand by our allies? Do we help our folks?
The war in Ukraine.
That's right.
Probably was started because we were so pathetically weak.
It shows just
we left tens of billions of dollars of military ordnance and firepower and
that's right.
equipment.
And then we just see, we see Russia on the rise, we see China on the rise. It's quite possible that we'll be in open conflict with them before the end of this decade. So, when folks think this doesn't really matter, wars are expensive, not just in national treasure, but a peer-on-peer war, like a war with China or Russia, that's going to be expensive in the cost of human lives and our blood. That's going to be your children and your grandchildren. So while we think some of these things don't really matter to us, these are local elections, or the presidential election, they really do, because you need a strong leader. You need a smart leader who surrounds themselves with educated, smart folks in that office, making good decisions to take care of the American population at large, not somebody who's going to look out for their best interest.
Speaking of who is smarter, the smarter voter as per the Democratic Socialists, and what is the reality of who votes for whom and whoever actually governs properly and does what's asked and needed for them, which is the president's first job is to protect us, right?
Correct.
Tell me, have you seen any polls about white, educated women, their voting patterns as a voting bloc? Have you seen anything about that?
I don't remember the specific numbers, but they seem to be the latest and greatest supporters of the Democratic Socialist Party at this point in time now.
And they're very educated.
Very educated, mostly.
A lot of them went to college on their fathers, and a lot of them, either just legacy.
It really is. It's that, and that's what we see in education. We've seen it mostly. It began in our colleges and universities. It really is a play straight out of Lenin and Stalin's playbook. Is we take the intellectuals, we put them in college campuses and universities. They're supposed to be the smart people doing the right thing, educating the future of the country, and instead they're indoctrinating. And I would say, to some extent, they themselves are out of touch with reality when all you do is, sit in the university and research your own thoughts or whatever you perceive to be correct. And then we see that play out generation after generation as we've really evolved as a country over the past 50, 60 years. More and more folks have the opportunity to get higher education, and we're pushing them into those indoctrination mills is really what most of our universities are. But now those same folks are becoming our teachers in our higher principals, bureaucracy, and public education at the lower level. And we see that emphasis on placing that indoctrination, DEI, all of these things that you're seeing now that President Trump is pushing back against, because they're trying to push that down into the educational system that our children are going to. And
so we're talking about these white educated women.
Yes.
Went to school, learned all they needed to learn, figure out what box to get into. And in our representative government, when it matters most, everything's on the line. We're in some of our darkest days. They rush, they have coffee clutches, they all decide they're either going to vote for Obama, Michelle Obama, if they ever got the chance. God bless. I know they'd like to have that.
They tried hard for Kamala.
And they tried hard for Kamala, and they did vote for the dumbest, most ignorant president we've had, at least in modern history.
Absolutely.
And yet they are highly educated white women. It's kind of frightening. And I'd want to break from that pack if I was them.
It really is frightening. It's
Maybe
it's
join the rubes, so to speak.
It really is hard to understand, and I think it's a breakdown in reality, in being able to perceive the world for what it really is, as opposed to what you were told it was.
Yeah.
And all you have to do is look at a map of the United States, the electoral map, and what you'll see is from sea to shining sea, it is solid red, except for little blue islands of these big urban cities that are filled with mostly the more affluent, highly educated folks that have this mindset. What I would say is, unfortunately as well, most Americans are not well traveled. Most Americans that do travel overseas get to go to nice places that are fairly safe. 1% of the United States population is served in the military. Those folks have seen the dirty side of the world. They've been to those places where most people don't have our freedoms. They don't have our quality of life. We really see where the downtrodden are, where the issues are, and what life is really like in these places where it's a life and death, on a daily basis. That's a key concern. Fortunately for our country, since the end of World War II, we have not really faced a lot of major issues. When you look at the greatest generation, the World War II generation, they came out of the Great Depression, fought a world war, beat the Nazis, beat Imperial Japan. They came back home and built the United States. We put a man on the moon. We have all these technological developments that we've been able to have, even though we have fought what I would say are necessarily smaller wars. No war is small. No conflict is small. But we have not had a draft since Vietnam to where we had to send a large number of folks overseas. There is not that.
We can thank Richard Nixon for that.
Correct. There's not a mandatory requirement to serve in uniform. So that sense of sacrifice, that sense of, we're all Americans together, that sense of hardship by not having to come up through the Depression. We have been a very blessed country. God has smiled upon our country. But the issue is a lot of folks, because we live in this kind of protective bubble, they have really lost sense of reality of what does the rest of the world have to deal with on a day-to-day basis. And so they look for these unfortunate groups. They look for victim classes.
Familiar groups that they feel comfortable with.
Correct. And so they take on some of these causes that get overinflated in importance in their mind, even though when you look at the overall statistics, how many people make up that group? And really it's kind of just a cultural distortion, really, of what's important and what your values
distortion. I like that.
So that's really how, when we're really trying to look at why people are voting the way they are, some of those who have the least to worry about are the ones who are voting for some of these things that are just way out in left field that don't make sense when you really get down to the nuts and bolts of how we run a country, how the country was meant to be run, what's important. Like I said before, if I can't feed my family, if I can't pay for my food, if I can't keep my electric bill, my lights turned on, or my water running, I don't care what your pronouns are. I don't care about all these other issues. That doesn't matter to most folks, and I think we saw that in this past election. Well,
and I'd like to offer this for the highly educated white women. You probably feel, because of your lifestyle, that you're insulated. You're encapsulated within an America that will always be protected. I will argue you probably have the most to lose if things turn south. So you might want to rethink the privilege that you've enjoyed. And there I am using that word privilege. But there is a privilege there. A lot of them have never suffered the hardship, never worked in the fields before. And some of us have actually worked in fields. You ever worked in a field before?
Only in gardens.
Well, you're a garden, but you're in the military, so you've worked in the field.
In the field, in a different type of field. But my parents, my mom worked here in the tobacco fields in eastern North Carolina when she was growing up. My father was...
Well, she's my peer.
Yes, she's your peer.
Yes, and we did work in tobacco fields.
Yes. My father was shoeless working. He was the stepson of a sharecropper growing up in the 40s, during World War II. He knows what that's like. He knows what it is to come from abject poverty, and what hard work can do if you're willing to work for it.
I bet it angers your father as much as it angers me when these people say, well, these are jobs Americans should be expected to do. Well, they never primed tobacco habit.
No. And I will caveat, just so that we don't sound condescending ourselves, it's not everybody. It's not, white women in general are the ones that are voting wrong. It's none of that. But there are some cultural aspects to that we look at. To some extent, we form our opinions and our political ideas based off of, who our parents were, what was happening as we were coming of age, different things like that. And what we've seen is the baby boomer generation. They were a little bit more liberal than the greatest generation was.
No, I was.
But Generation X, my generation, we're a little bit more conservative. And when we look at how the voting patterns have been since these newer generations come of age, the millennials, the children of the baby boomers, have been mostly more liberal in thought than Generation X was. Now, this newest generation that just voted for the first time in our presidential election last year, the Zennials, they are more conservative than the millennials were, but they are the children of Generation X. So we do see some generational differences and likenesses based off of how things have been happening. That's not a trend that I would say would go so far as to prove how one group is going to vote versus another, but it is an interesting thing to look at, and it may play more of an issue as we move forward into the future elections, depending on what we look at, what those issues may be, whether it's economy, a war, anything else that's going on.
Back in the days when I conformed to nonconformity, and which is a real misnomer. A lot of us were liberals. We didn't know better, but we despised Vietnam, and we despised race relations being so poor. And we saw the fix.
Right.
The fix is we never should have gotten into Vietnam, and history bears that out. I mean, Ho Chi Minh loved America, and Truman and the CIA, which were what became the CIA, ruined our ability to negotiate with Ho Chi Minh early on. And he was an early leader in North Vietnam. Vietnam, which was North Vietnam at that time. And we made some mistakes there. But I will say this, a lot of baby boomers got saved by one Republican, Ronald Reagan.
Ronald Reagan.
He spoke so clearly and so eloquently. A lot of us thought, well, do we need to be in this box the rest of our life? Let's get out of this box. Let's think outside the box and think about what's real and what could be. And that shining city on the hill. That's what we need to think about.
We really do. I was raised on Reagan. I was born just prior to his presidency, but I can remember watching him. He was, he still is my favorite president of all time. But Ronald Reagan is I would say, as a Republican leader, he is the one to emulate. And some folks may forget, Ronald Reagan was a Democrat before he became a Republican.
A lot of us were Democrats.
And came out of California. So
Jesse Helms was a Democrat before he became a Republican.
There is hope for everyone.
There's hope. There's hope for us all. Speaking of going to Mars, I think you mentioned that earlier. Speaking of intelligence, speaking of thinking outside the box, speaking of hypocrisy, what has happened to the Democratic Socialists and the non-patriot left in their absurd and just very recent hatred of Elon Musk? I mean, he thinks outside the box. He sees a problem. He would have seen the problem in American government, whether he'd become aligned with Mr. Trump or not. And a lot of you that don't know the story, he was quasi on the fence which way to go politically. But I think he wanted to take a political position. And when he saw Mr. Trump nearly shot in Butler, Pennsylvania, I think his exclamation is, "This man is a badass. I'm going to support this guy."
I think so.
I mean, it wasn't that he got shot. It's that he rose up and yelled, "Fight, fight, fight."
Right.
And he just said, "That's it." And I think even Mark Zuckerberg said, "Wow, he is an American badass." That was their words.
When you stand by your convictions, that's, if you're willing to take a bullet for what you believe in, you have to believe that person is, they're telling you the truth. They mean what they say if you're willing to get shot for it.
Well, one of the greatest issues in modern times, a huge amount of money spent, trillions of dollars, was for the Green New Deal.
That's right.
The Green New Deal was going to be all-encompassing. It was going to change all of us. It would change America. It was going to start off with a few trillion here, a few trillion there. Eventually, it would have been tens of trillions of dollars, maybe hundreds of trillions. Eventually, that becomes real money for a lot of you back home. That's really an amount of money this country could not stand.
No.
But it got to be so. It wasn't so much about saving the planet and saving our ecology. It was more about changing the way we are a republic.
That's right.
We would no longer be a republic.
Correct.
We would be a communist. What would you call that?
Yeah, it really,
a communist nation,
it
but
really becomes
a despotism, a despotic nation.
It's a despotic nation. It reminds me a lot of how China is run. China is a quasi-capitalist, quasi-communist country where the government ultimately has control over all of the businesses, but they still want to compete like a capitalist society. It really is, and it's not sustainable. It doesn't work. There's all kinds of issues that we'll see, and China's seeing it now. If you really look into Chinese politics, if you look into their economic development.
But now Elon Musk is an oligarch. He is no longer the great creator of well-functioning electric cars to save our planet.
They see him as a turncoat.
He's a turncoat.
That's what they see.
He's an oligarch.
But
he's a hated man.
He is.
And their idea, we're talking about democratic socialists and the worst of the non-patriot left. They see a freedom of speech as firebombing his cars.
Yes.
Firebombing these dealerships, spray painting them, telling people that drive Teslas, keying them, saying terrible things to them, spitting on people that work at Tesla, those kind of things. And these are the people that said they were proponents of electric vehicles and electric everything. No more gas water heaters, no more gas stoves, everything electric.
Yes.
Now they don't like electric anymore because he's associated with Trump.
That's correct.
Mr. Trump. They're willing to go with gas guzzling Lake Tahoes. Not Lake Tahoes, Tahoes. Lake Tahoes. Chevrolet Tahoes. I better say that. Or I'll
Which
say
they would have all thrown into Lake Tahoe.
Yeah,
until he turned on them.
Yeah, exactly. And just because he turned. The thing I don't get about the hypocrisy of the left is they don't want people to have the freedom of thought to make changes. And sometimes people cannot stick with the same dog. Mm-hmm. And what we're seeing in Doge, where the hit dog's yelping, they're yelping loud. I think that's what it is. Maybe they're getting money out of the system, a lot of money out of the system, and they're paying the money or whatever it's taking, just like in the summer of George, that was financed. They're paying the money now to destroy Tesla and try to put Mr. Musk out of business. I think he's going to stick no matter what.
I think he will. Civil disobedience and freedom of speech is okay when it fits a certain party line. Yeah. And if it doesn't fit their party line, then they change it. They change the narrative, and that's what we've seen with Musk. And when you look at the federal government and when you look at the way we operate, you do have to have a little bit of business sense to run. When you look at the amount of dollars that we spend, what we're spending it on, you want to spend it wisely. Nobody is going to be a CEO if they run everything they own into massive debt or bankruptcy. And bringing some business sense into government, which I believe Elon Musk is doing, is an important piece of that. And they don't like it because he just happens to be doing it with Trump.
So I've expounded quite a bit on the hypocrisy of the left, the non-patriot left, the Democratic Socialist Party. I'm going to come all the way back to the Republican convention.
Yes.
There's a lot of hypocrisy amongst these Republicans. You called them rhinos. You did call them rhinos. Yes. Some of them call themselves Christian conservatives. Yet they support those people who believe in swapping votes to share power with the Democratic Socialists and do whatever it takes to keep that power, even if it means raising spending to very high levels for, I would call a tier one, not so poor, but a tier one rural county.
Yes.
And I feel that as a longstanding county commissioner, I've been back on the board for 6 years, we have wasted tens of millions of dollars just in those 6 years.
We've wasted a lot of it just on this new school that we don't need.
Yeah, 10.5 million so far. But I see a lot of waste, a lot of things we could do differently, but they have the support of these Democrats turn Republican to get elected to serve as Democrats. I mean, we have Republicans on the commission that serve as Democrats. We've had that for a while, and it's been going on for decades, and that's why there's a lot of waste, fraud, and abuse here in Beaufort County. Doge for Beaufort County.
That's exactly what we need.
We've talked about that before. We'll probably talk about it again.
Absolutely. And that's all you have to look at. And that's why it is so important to stay, again, involved in local politics.
Yes.
Look at the news. Look at it from all angles. Draw your own opinions. Don't just listen to a soundbite or what anybody tells you.
Don't get stuck in a box.
You really shouldn't. But when you have somebody, and that's why I call them rhinos, Republicans in name only.
They created their own box, by the way.
If Republican values have traditionally been limited government, fiscal responsibility, lower taxes, strong national defense, good education, family values, if that's the values of the Republican Party, and you look at these folks' voting records and they're not voting in favor of lowering taxes, they're increasing spending, they're not getting our public education in line with where it should be, I really question whether or not they are Republicans, because they don't tend to be voting for those Republican values. That's my opinion. Everybody's entitled to their own, but I do encourage everybody to do your own research and look at it, because the truth will come to light.
And I will also suggest follow the money.
Absolutely.
Watch those who cater to special interests, who give money to this group and that group. Your money to this group and that group. What are they getting out of it? They're getting something, even if it's just a pat on the back, and we're going to vote for you. My family's going to vote for you. Everybody we know, we're going to talk to them about voting for you. We're going to keep you in office. It might not be a money thing, but it's your money creating a position of status for these people. And for them to remain in that status quo is taken away from you. You need to understand this is a self-governed society. You be part of that government, even at the local level. Come help us take back our government and take back our republic, and we will survive. We will be that shining city on the hill, and the good Lord will be forever grateful. Because if America goes, the rest of the world's gone. I know that to be true. Well, we've had a good conversation today. Well, thank you. God bless you. You want to finish up with something? I just took a...
I think you said it all. It really is. Yes, absolutely.
Thanks.
It's that's all folks need to know.
Yeah. And give us your opinions. You can find us here. Stan at BeaufortCountyNow.com. Dave at SymbioticNetworks.com.
Correct. We'd love to hear from you.
We'd love to hear from you. All right. See you next week in a brand new show.